Welcome to tonight's Christmas murder edition of Litopia After Dark. I'm Ian Winn, the techno-pagan octopus messiah who, along with super agent producer Peter Cox, we're here with a very special guest. But before we begin, I would like to talk to you kids out there who may be thinking about going to bed. It's story time, but it's actually not a story. It's a little bit of history. It's the history of music. So put down your phone. I'll wait. Take off your headphones. Thank you very much. Now shut up, the adults are talking. First came the dinosaurs, but they had no sense of rhythm, so God destroyed them with a meteor. That's a fact. Millions of years later, during the age of mammals, a species of highly evolved chimpanzees, stupefied on fermented berries, began banging rocks together to roughly recreate their own heartbeats. We call this music house or techno, and God was off his tits on ecstasy. But did you know that before this was a 1,000-year period of musical desolation, where people forgot their own heartbeats, forgot how to enjoy themselves, and instead intellectualized their music, forcing it through a veritable, orchestra of complicated instruments designed to sound like tortured waterfowl? This music was called classical, and God grew very bored, so he unleashed a bunch of plagues. Luckily, hundreds of years later, the sons and daughters of former slaves in the United States would rediscover their own heartbeats and create a sound called blues to ruminate upon their own experience, rock and roll to celebrate it, and jazz to make the intellectuals feel included. All these sounds would soon be stolen by a set of hips called Elvis, who later would himself be cannibalized by a group of albino hippies called the Beatles. In time, the world's ear holes would fill with heavy metal, hip-hop, R&B, alternative, country, and the house and techno mentioned earlier. But right before then, kids, in the 60s and 70s, it was a golden age, an age of excess, an age when people had no idea how much cocaine would kill an elephant, but they knew how to properly trash a hotel room. This was the age of the rock stars. It started in England. It started with the punks. It fought with and then merged with and then made love to the mods, and their bastard offspring became classic rock. So listen here, you little shits. Without bands like The Who, Pink Floyd, and the Rolling Stones, you wouldn't have septuagenarian human skeletons playing to packed arenas for your grandparents. You know what's wrong with you? With your Arctic Monkeys and your Kanye West, your Miley Bloody Cyrus? You don't know your history, okay? You don't know anything. You, with your saggy trousers and your hairstyles and your repetitive, soulless, derivative music. Hell, my wife had a studded leather jacket and a real Mohican, okay? And she got that shit by bleaching it herself and using clothing dye. She didn't go to the salon, so why don't you go out and get a style yourselves, go to bed, and most of all, get off my lawn.
Are you kidding?
Tonight on Litopia After Dark, we're talking to Terry Rollins, one of the main chronicles of this golden age of rock stars. Former writer for the NME, he's a man who hung out with the Jam's Paul Weller, a.k.a. the Mod Father. Authored...
He hates me now.
Really? There we are. We'll get to that. Authored Good Times, Bad Times, The Definitive Diary of the Rolling Stones, 1960 to 1969, and remains convinced that Rolling Stones founder Brian Jones' death was not, as ruled by the coroner, an accident or a suicide.
Because it wasn't.
See what I mean? He's just itching to get in there because he's got some shit to say, folks.